Welcome, everybody, back to another exciting episode in this web series we are doing in partnership with Microsoft. I am Carl Hooker. I'm your host. I'm an educational consultant, author, and speaker here in Austin, Texas, home of Franklin's Barbecue, which I am representing today. And I want to welcome you again to the second part in a three-part series that we are doing around personalized student experiences in higher education. Before I introduce our guest, just a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is, of course, being recorded right now live and will be available to view afterwards. We do have chat enabled depending on what platform you're on. So if you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, feel free to use the comment feature. If you're on Twitter, I think you can reply actually to this tweet at the moment and it'll pop up. We want to involve you as much as we can in this conversation. So as you pose questions to our guests, if there's a time when I can slide it in there, I'll try to get those questions up. This will be a jam-packed 30 minutes. And we have lots to cover. So hopefully we'll have time for a couple of questions. If you want to catch one of the previous recordings, we did have that sent out just recently. But if you sign up via this registration link, mrhook.it/personal, that one going across the bottom of your screen, this will be your way of getting contact information for me. So I will send you the recording of the previous episode as well as this one, as well as notifying you of our final episode, which I'll talk about here at the end of the show today. Anything else? Let me see if there's any other last minute things. Yep. As we said, this webinar is titled Personalize Student Experiences in Higher Education. And again, we want to thank our partner Microsoft for bringing together all the thought leaders throughout this series for what is a very important conversation, especially as we start to see lots of different changes, not only in K-12. Higher ed is really starting to feel the effects of many things, whether it be financial, whether it be the change of generative AI. The idea that we need to create a better personalized experience for our students is more important than it ever has been at the higher ed level, which is why I'm excited today to bring a practitioner, someone who's actually in the space at University of Southern Florida. This is Alice Wei. Alice, come on in. Say hi.
Thank you, Carl.
Alice is the title. Alice, I always gets me. Okay, so it's the Assistant VP of Transformation and Innovation, correct?
Yes.
As an amazing title with a very long business card, I can only imagine. Tell us before we get into some questions here. Give me a little bit about your origin story. Like what got you started in the field of education, and then led you to this current role that you're in.
Yeah. So I started off with inheriting a decent size high code team, I would say around 2014, 2015. And the thing that we were faced with was the value proposition that we'd given our clients at the time. What really wasn't being delivered anymore because we were bogged down with technical debt, which is, a very common term when we talk about application development, for example, and solution development. And I think the shift that I wanted to push our department to go in is, can we do things faster? Can we do things better? Can we kind of shake our own foundations a little bit to see if we can bring value back to what we're delivering to our customers or our clients? And so this is where we started our low-code journey, I would say. We brought in a low-code technology and we were able to get 8x speed actually very quickly in terms of helping bring value. That meant that solutions that we'd built, I would say normally it would have taken 6 months to a year. We're finishing up in weeks and in under a quarter, for example. And so that really showed the value proposition of changing your technology to meet the needs of and the demands of your clients as technology evolves.
Yeah, and that gets us kind of this next question, which is like, what are some of those projects? You mentioned the low code. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. But I know you're also working on a couple of other things like a CRM for all, which sounds like quite a lift for anybody at the higher ed level. That's a lot to kind of put together in one basket. So tell us a little bit about those projects.
Yeah, we're starting on from low code, now we're going to no code journey, which is kind of funny. But, we try to evolve with the times. And what we realize now is doesn't matter how fast we go, we still can't meet the demand because there's just so much. And when it comes to higher ed that we could do to help automate. And the thing that we're looking at is, how do we enable our business units to have their own developments when they need it? So that's where the no code comes in. And I would say even where AI comes in to certain pieces, because what we want to be able to do is empower them to do the things that are easy enough and enable them to do it. So we're actually forming a COE, a Center of Excellence, with a model similar to, if you're a Mac fan, you'll get this, the iGenius model, where we have specialists that understand the technology. We're not going to build the solution for you, but we'll be there to help support and guide you through any problems you have with using the no code solutions that are out there. And so that's what we're looking at doing for our no code piece. The other ambitious project that we're working on is what I like to kind of hashtag called CRM for all. And in the higher ed space, what we see a lot, and we've talked to quite a few, I have talked to personally to quite a few universities at this point, and a lot of the use cases they have is, well, admissions gets their own separate CRM, and then everyone else is either got their own little thing or they're out, they have to fend for themselves. And what I think we want to change here at USF is to say we can't have one CRM. This will save us money and cost of licenses, but it'll also save us the redundancy of having to populate the same data over and over again for the same use, for example. And so what we want to do is enable a CRM platform for anyone to use, whether it's an admissions office marketing person or a department admin assistant that needs to send out an email blast. We want to be able to provide that solution in one technology, in one stack, one platform. And that's kind of, it's very ambitious, I will say, because a lot of it is in the details around the data access and the segmentation access, for example. But that's kind of the things that we're looking for in our roadmap.
Yeah, that is a quite an ambitious project when you talk about the silos that exist in higher ed between departments, between colleges, getting everybody on that same back end platform. I like that CRM for all. That is definitely an ambitious goal. And I feel like the technology is one thing that can help with that. But I imagine there's some other challenges. And this is kind of leads me to this next question, because from you and I, from the discussions we've had prior to this, I know that there's a lot of things that you're doing there that are, you've already mentioned a couple of them, the high code to low code to eventually no code, the CRM for all. These are pretty big changes across, system wide in your university level. What are some of those challenges you have to overcome? Is it just the technology part of it? Is there other parts of it? Because I know in K-12 we have our own set of challenges too, that I imagine are probably just amplified at higher ed. So what are a few of the challenges, and how are you guys overcoming them there?
Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to sound like a broken record, like many of the people. Technology is probably the least challenging of it, in all honesty, especially nowadays. There's so much out there that you can do. What I think usually becomes the biggest challenge is process and the people part of it. And we tend to underestimate that. That was one of the biggest lessons that I learned actually when I first started my role. And because, it sounds snazzy and great and all that, but a lot of my work is not with technology. It's actually with getting our business processes in a place where we're assessing it and saying, is this the right way you want to do things truly now that you have automation as an option? You may not need to do it the same way anymore. Can we change the way the process was? Can we reduce waste? The other part is getting people to embrace the technology. The culture aspect of it is huge. And people also underestimate a part of that culture being change management and acceptance of failure. And in the sense that failure is not a bad thing, failure is probably better than you going out, rolling out. Failure in increments is better than failing all at once at the end of a waterfall project, for example, because at least along the way you're learning. So those are kind of the challenges I would see in terms of technology adoption.
Yeah, people and process, right? Those are it. I mean, those are the big things that if you can get that squared away, the technology will work itself out. You mentioned failure. I'm going to bring this up too, just kind of reiterate. Is there an example how are you guys getting? It sounds like you're doing lots of different things, but I'm sure you're not just scaling them all out and saying, okay, everyone's going to do this today. I mean, how do you get through that rapid failure process? Or what do you guys have in place there at USF that helps you kind of onboard these new systems or new ideas or new ideologies?
Yeah, I would say actually failure helps reduce risk, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Right way, it really helps reduce risk because if you can get the folks to think about it in more of a bite-sized piece, kind of a buy-in, then you get incremental knowledge about what you're trying to implement. One of the things that we've built internally to kind of help with that is what we call a TAP program, technology adoption program. And we very blindly borrowed this from Microsoft. So if you've heard it before, I'm sure you know where it came from. And what we do is we invite trusted partners out in the business to join this group. It's a very selective group, and it's a equal amount of risk and investment from both sides, whether it's IT or from the business. In that sense, what we're asking for is, if you join the TAP, you get, an example is, if you join the TAP, then you get access to early adoption of technology. We ask that you do that. You may not get a chance to opt out, for example, unless this is really something serious. In exchange, we give you a little bit more access or better access into being able to give priority things that you really need for your unit to finish. So we give you like a little jump in the line, so to speak, in exchange, or a little bit more premium service or attention as a TAP member. And that's only one of the trade-offs that we give. As an example, our CIO also invests money into it, some kind of equivalence, so that we have some starter money to use for those types of innovations. But that way, we are working with people going in eager to embrace technology, knowing that they've opted in. And the mindset is completely different from someone that's not willing, and you're dragging them in and that kind of thing. So the TAP program has really helped us with rolling out new things, because then we say, okay, let's just roll it out for this one department of the college, or do we roll it out for the entire college? If it fails, it never leaves that group. If it succeeds, then we say, oh, how do we scale this for the rest of the university? Because this is valuable and this is really great. And we were able to prove that this is something that, more than just this department or college would want. And so that's why failure is a big key to, our ability to succeed here at the university, I would say.
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit more on the TAP project, because I feel like this is a key component for those of you that are listening, that are in higher ed, in the departments that are maybe working on change or change management. Having a team like that, we did this at K-12 too, where we would have certain teachers. We didn't say they were voluntold; most of them were, opting in. How do you choose, or how are those TAP members selected, Alice? I don't think we've ever talked about that. How is it just you kind of tap people on the shoulder? Are some kind of nominated? How does that work?
It's a mix. So we have really good trusting relationships with certain deans in our university. And so those are usually the first ones we go to, because we know that we've been able to successfully implement technology with them, and they are behind our backs in support of whatever it is that we need to get done. So those are usually the ones we select. So you kind of have to assess in terms of who are your allies, who are going to be there with you if it fails, and say, hey, that was a great trial and we learned from it, now let's move on and do something different, right? It's not always going to be the most high political person out there.
Right.
It may be some small little unit, but that's where you need that trust. And then you start building and adding and inviting people. Like, for example, I like to use the Cotter model for change management. And one of the biggest things they say is it's by invitation. You invite people in, you don't force people in, because people that are invited and willing to join are going to be way more engaged and willing to have skin in the game than someone where you just force them to say you're going to be on this committee, and tough luck kind of thing. So that's kind of the approach we take, and we establish a guiding coalition or a grassroots group, and that's where they take ownership. They get buy-in and ownership of whatever it is we're trying to implement. And that is the most powerful voice you can ever have, because they will go out proactively and market their baby, essentially.
Yeah. That idea of buy-in is so important. You're doing it at that grassroots level, setting that foundation, because you've mentioned the word failure several times, which I think is still very much a taboo word in education. in many ways, even though it shouldn't be. And you're saying, okay, we've built this foundational value of everyone's bought into it. If a mistake does happen, if it does fail, we need you to be honest, because I know a lot of times in our organizations, we just say, yeah, it was great. Let's just keep moving. Let's keep building it out. I mean, do you guys find that, does that happen sometimes in projects where someone might say, hey, this didn't work. Let's redirect or scale back or change course.
Yeah, we've seen it. Some of our more, I think, um, more the ones that embrace failure will have those conversations. We still, I mean, we're not perfect, so we still have folks that moving their cheese is a very scary thing, and so it's something that we work on continuously. But it's an irony to say that in higher ed we're afraid of failure, because if you have a research institution, you're failing all the time.
Right.
Not every research project is successful. And so that's kind of why we kind of push, we try to remind folks, saying we fail all the time at the university. It's just a matter of how do you do it and can you afford it? And the afford part is, instead of investing 6 million up front, can you just invest 50K? Right. And so those are the kind of conversations that we have and push our business to think about, because the research side does it all the time. And that's the spirit that we would like our business to embrace as well, because it is the heart of higher ed.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that, like, you're right. So in one case, you have the research side where it doesn't even talk to the business side, but having that kind of culture throughout, I think that's an important part of what you're doing there. One of the big things, of course, we can't go more than a few minutes without talking about it, so we'll go ahead and bring it up now, because you were talking about these kind of pilot or vanguard groups that you guys have set up with that TAP program. I imagine they're probably wrestling a little bit with this too. What's your kind of view on generative AI? What's the university's view? What's the feel for it? Because I know in K-12 we have our own set of things that we're kind of scrambling around about, but higher ed also has some concerns, but also some possible positives that can come out of it. What's your thoughts on generative AI now that we're, I guess, 6 months in?
Yeah. Seeing as transformation is part of my title,
Yeah.
I embrace it in the sense that it's just any other two new technology that we have out there. I think people inflate the fear because it's AI. Not to say that there isn't, but I think when we get into this fear mode, if that's the immediate reaction, you get into that your most primitive part of your brain, which is the fight or flight kind of mindset. And so if you get into the flight mindset, then you just want to run away from the technology and not dig in and learn. And it's the same with the fight reaction. And I think what we need to do as technologists, because we all are, if you're in higher ed, you don't have a choice because it surrounds you. So we're all technologists. And I think the right reaction to it is, I need to learn more and understand what it's good at and what it's bad at. And then we can start segmenting out things that make sense for us to invest time in and things that we may need to set guardrails around. You can't blanket say that AI is bad, because I don't believe that at all. In fact, it's made my life easier when I have to, for example, write a fancy email that's sent to someone important, but I may not be the best person to type out a really nice email. So I use ChatGPT for that kind of stuff, for example. I haven't touched code in years, for example. If I want to build a simple little workflow to manage my approval of my employees' leave, or whatever silly thing it is, I should be able to do it, right? And if AI helps me so I don't have to learn code for these type of simple things, then I should embrace it. But there are things that are bad, like how do we make sure that it's not encroaching on intellectual property and creativity of people and all that kind of stuff. So there are pros and cons. I don't think there's a blanket answer whether it's bad or good. I think it depends on the use, and you won't know until you dip your fingers and your toes in to learn about it, versus just blanket saying, it's scary or it's bad or good.
Are there professors or anyone that are afraid that AI may take their jobs? I've heard that a lot too. That's been a new thing that comes out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think our professors, the ones that we've heard have been, they're excited to use it. They want to use it. Again, this is the research side of things. They want to get their hands on it and learn about it and do research projects with it. There are fears in terms of how students will use it. I think that's really where it is, in terms of like, well, then how do I know this is really their work versus the AI doing the work? And that's where you need to define guardrails. I don't know if it's as much as you need to build things into the AI to do to check, because I don't really know if that makes more complexity than it is, versus it's just agreed upon morale thing that you're saying you will not do this. And or even daring these, you change the way you teach, so then
Yeah.
it's essay is no longer good enough to assess whether they're good students or not. How else are you going to gauge that they are actually learning what you taught?
Yeah, that's going to be, I think, part of that change that happens, because you do have the honor code that's part of most university systems, and we hope that kids aren't cheating. And we know that some of them, even before AI, are probably
Yeah,
doing different
you're
things. They've been
already
doing it,
doing
yeah, before Google, before all that.
it. Yeah.
So it comes down to, like you're saying, like, what is the outcome now? Maybe you change what that outcome process is, so it's not just a paper anymore. Maybe it's a bigger type of creative project that really demonstrates you understand it. Um,
Yeah.
as we get to this final question, this is kind of a big one, and this whole series has been built around this ideology of like personalizing the student experience. You talked about it even at the what you're doing at the CRM level, where you're going to build this singleton platform that basically gets out to different users, have different experiences based on the same set of data, which helps personalize for them. What do you think the future holds for that, for higher ed? Because I think, when I reflect on my higher ed experience, which of course most people listening to this, if they're in higher ed or if they've been in higher ed at some point in their life, they think of the 300-person giant massive classroom where the one professor spews out information for 3 hours, and then we dutifully take notes or surf on Facebook at the same time. So for those, those of us thinking of it that way, how do colleges get to more where you guys are doing at USF, where it seems like there's a lot more iteration and kind of trial and failure and research happening on the fly?
Yeah, I think some universities are addressing this. We have certain areas in our university that are trying to change the way that they assess a student, I will say, in terms of, making sure that their experience is richer than just what's in the classroom. But I think from a technology standpoint, because I'm not an expert on the higher ed, how to teach part, but I can speak to the technology. I think in general, we need to prepare for the world where there's a man-machine combination. If you haven't read the book by I can't forget, I'm not remembering the gentleman's name, but The Average is Over is a really good book where they talk about how, in the future, and actually even now, we are going to be paired with a machine, and how, and it's not the machine versus the human, it's a man machine combination, and how much better we'll be able to be in doing our work and making decisions when you're paired with a partner. And so I think the education around it needs to change in saying there's just going to be moments where the machine is going to aid the individual. And that's a baseline knowledge now. We don't need to reteach it, maybe, because it's going to always be there. For example, most people don't do math in their head anymore unless you're majoring in math. You use a calculator. And so now it's talking about a little bit more sophisticated machines, AI. So what are those baseline things? Now we just assume that it's going to be easy access for the student to have, and versus things that we say, no, you still need to have some base knowledge in, because you need to understand the origins of it and stuff like that. So I think it's a man-machine combination world that we're looking at, and how do we, as a universities, wrap our educational structures around that so that the student experience continues to be deep and rich, but understanding that baselines may have changed completely now.
As you're talking, I was thinking more universities need people like you in these roles. Are there other people like you that have? I mean, I know your title is very kind of unique. I've never heard that title before. Are you finding that there's other universities kind of stepping up to the plate with this transformative change idea?
I think there are, the thing I think I benefit from is my CIO is a show me not tell me type of mindset, and so that helps a lot in terms of making sure that our innovation projects and the things that we want to try out are quick and fast in terms of returning whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that we need to do. I see organizations where these titles exist. However, they may not have the support or the flexibility to actually do that kind of work. And admittedly, this, like I said, I've been doing this since 2014, right? So it's a many years in coming of building the structures and the culture within just in our department. Forget the rest of the university.
Right.
And so it will take time to build. But I think any organization can do it, but they have to really believe in it and be willing to embrace it.
It's much more than just the title. That's awesome. Alice, where can people find out more about you and your work or reach out to you? Or LinkedIn? What's the best place?
LinkedIn's the best place. Feel free. We're happy to talk with anyone. I've talked to many other universities in the past as well, and we love sharing stories and experiences. I don't claim to know everything, so I love learning from others as well.
I could tell just from our time talking briefly, Alice, that you're definitely a lover of learning. And I think having someone like you in an organization like USF is so valuable. So thank you again for joining us today. We're going to say goodbye to Alice. Wave goodbye there. And we'll wrap up here pretty quickly, folks. Thank you guys again for joining us. This is the second part of a 3-part series that we're doing on personalized student experiences in higher education. And we heard from Rob Curtin from Microsoft in the first series about a month ago. Alice today. Next month, this is at the end of the month, June 27th, we're actually going to invite our executive director of information technology from Kent State University to also give us some kind of back-end insight into this personalized student experience in higher ed. So his view and Alice's view, there may be some similarities, but there may be some big differences too, because they're in different parts of their journey. And definitely, of course, different titles too, as we see there, kind of a more of a traditional informational technology title. But these people, on every campus play a role in what's going to happen with our students going forward. And I think that's important to think about. What roles are you playing if you're in higher ed? Who are you working with? What departments are you doing? And then, like Alice said today, what are you doing to make sure that if you do fail, you can fail fast, learn from that, recover, and then again, spread that knowledge and innovation throughout your organizations. I loved hearing about the CRM for All project, from her low code to no code project. Those are things that universities need to be thinking about as we move forward into this age of generative AI. So again, thank you all so much. Thank you to Microsoft. I'm going to give you kind of a quick scroll here at the bottom. If you want to join that last in the series, or if you want copies of the recording of this or the previous episode, be sure to just register right there in the ongoing series, mrhook.it/personal. Take you to a form, you fill it out, I'll send it over to you, get you all the information you need. Again, thank you guys so much. Oh, Bria saying hi, popping in there too from YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. And Rob, and those of you that joined on YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter today, we appreciate you. We'll see you back here June 27th, 2 p.m. Eastern, as we meet with Jim Rayburd there from Kent State University. Thank you, everybody.